Welcome back to the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. Maraya Brown here to help you with your vitality and hormones and all the things. And I have Margaret Lynch with me today. I'm so excited to introduce her to you. So if you go back maybe 3 or 4 years, I had this book recommended to me. It's called Unblocked, and it's written by Margaret Lynch Raniere with her husband, David Raniere. And it says a revolutionary approach to tapping into your chakra empowerment energy to reclaim your passion, joy, and confidence. And this book was actually something that I've used on virtual VIP days, facilitating kind of reading a chapter actually for clients going through a pretty beautiful tapping exercise to release and really root into the root chakra specifically. So then fast forward to this past March, I was in Hawaii with a dear friend of mine, Lee Richter. I've also interviewed her on the podcast. You're welcome to go back and listen to that interview. And she and I were chatting, and she said something about how she was going to go pop on a call with this woman, Margaret Lynch. And I said, I know that name. And it was like, oh, that's the book. That's the woman. And so she put us in contact. We had a chat. And of course, it's like love at first Zoom site. And come on, I've got to bring you onto the podcast. So I have her here with me today. And she uses her own methodology using the ancient system of chakras and emotional freedom technique, or tapping, or EFT, for clients to experience a deeply felt shift as they reclaim their inner power, their motivational drive, and their confidence. So welcome, Margaret.
Thank you, Maraya. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you here. Just so that you guys know, she's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, Miami Herald, San Francisco and Houston Chronicles, NBC, ABC, CBS News, Fox, and CNN. I mean, I could go on and on. How else would you introduce yourself? What else have you done other than writing Unblocked, which is a phenomenal book?
I sort of had a nondescript corporate career for 18 years before I did this. So you wouldn't know me from there unless you were, in the biotech industry. My background is actually in engineering. But about 18 years ago, I did what so many women do when they want to start a new chapter. And I stepped into my passion, which was really coaching, and actually coaching and leadership training. But the first book that I got to do a book deal with was Penguin, and that was Tapping into Wealth. And that really continued to keep putting me on bigger stages and on the map. Unblocked came out a couple years ago with Hay House, which was the publisher that I really wanted because it's such a great fit for me. But people often know me from my YouTube videos. I have over 6 million views on the videos on my YouTube channel, or they've seen me on stage or on the virtual stage. You might be able to see behind me there if you're watching us on video. That's really where I spend most of my time. I also do speak in companies as well. I don't often talk about the chakras as we might today because that gets super woo-woo, but I do talk about the technique that you mentioned called tapping, or emotional freedom technique, because that is super double extra clinically proven, and it really is a real technique, and it really does work to turn off the fight or flight. That's what I've been up to for 18 years, really just getting the word out there on how to biohack motivation and leadership and confidence in the ways that particularly affect women. Because of our hormonal differences, we have to be more attentive and vigilant to the way stress affects our system, because it is very different from men. So it's really just kind of been my honor and passion to be out there.
I love that you're already segueing, and then let's go there and really talk about women specifically. And I know that you're really starting to talk more on stages about women and their hormones. And I just want to put in a little plug for EFT. Even when I did my nurse practitioner training at Yale, I was at a well-known university, and they talked about the research of tapping and encouraged us to get certified in EFT. And so I did. This was back in 2006. So yes, if you guys are wondering, chakras, legit, real, true, energy's real. But if you're like, that's a little bit too woo-woo for me, when it comes to tapping in EFT, there really is substantiated research. Okay. What about women? So you already mentioned women and men are different. I know you're talking a good amount around female hormones, especially in this perimenopause and menopause journey for women that are wanting to rise in their leadership and be more powerful, potent women out in the world. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
I am going to be 58 So, a big surprise. I suddenly became interested in the last couple of years about knowing what my hormones were. And the more that I researched it, not just about physical, but because my lane is motivation and leadership and confidence in women. And I'm coaching women who are like me, want to become coaches, want to become consultants, want to be professionals out there. And what they often struggle with, especially when they're making this change midlife, is what is wrong with me? Why do I feel low energy? Why am I not motivated? Why do I feel so stuck? And so I've been helping coaches not only solve that problem for themselves, but teaching them how to get their clients unstuck for many years and really focusing on the fight or flight. So anytime we have anxiety or stress, or what if people don't like it? For instance, if I act confident, what if I'm not smart enough? What if I put myself out there and people are like, who do you think you are? Which is kind of the classic. Whenever we have that, it means the fight or flight's being activated, which dumps cortisol into your body. You can't stop it with your mind. You can do positive thinking, but if you really feel that fight or flight, and of course, public speaking is a good example for people that they can relate to, right? Whether you have it or you know someone who has it, it's that, the whole body just goes into this fight or flight response, and it's hard to just talk it away. So tapping turns off that fight or flight within a few minutes of tapping on basically acupuncture points, where people would put a needle for acupuncture. You tap with fingertips. In a few minutes of doing that, the cortisol comes down, the brain comes out of fight or flight. And that's been a very successful piece because tapping is often used for trauma, for therapy, for anxiety and depression. It's an incredible technique. They're using it in the VA with veterans. But in my lane, if someone can use tapping to help you turn off war trauma, I can use tapping to help a woman turn off her what if I'm not good enough? Because you see the scale difference. But either way, it's the fight or flight. So as I came into my 50s, I was more interested in hormones in general. And I delved into the study around really the neuroscience or the neurobiology of motivation versus procrastination, not expecting to find such a huge disparity between women and men when it comes to what's called the stress response or the fight or flight. And so, I can walk through some of those differences because it really shocked me. And again, it's why we cannot mess around as women. If we are trying to do big things and we need confidence and charge and motivation, we really have to be aware and take care, whether you still have your period, and understand the fluctuations over the month and how stress interacts with those phases, which I'm sure your listeners probably know a lot about, right? There's phases of your cycle where you're like girls around the world, right? And it starts with me. And there's other phases where you're trying to build progesterone, right? Where you have to like rest more and eat more carbs. But especially perimenopause and into menopause, we really have to take care of our hormones because there's this massive disparity between men and women, both around sources of stress and then the impact of stress on our hormones. We'll talk about both because there's hidden sources of stress that men don't really relate to. But let's start out maybe talking a little bit just about the hormonal differences.
Yeah, I want to, and just to kind of bring it to highlight, I usually put it in the bucket of we're either in stress or bless. When we're in stress, that's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that's cortisol. And you're saying this, and I want everybody to hear it. Cortisol can be produced whether it's real, imagined, or anticipated. And what you're about to go into, which I'm so excited for everyone to hear, is when we're in a stress response, cortisol is the focus, survival is the focus, the body's not producing hormones. We want to bring you over to the bless side. And so that's when Margaret is talking about helping the nervous system calm down. Things that using tapping that has been used in war veterans to be able to take that moment where we're having a stress response, whether it's real, imagined, or anticipated, help the nervous system calm down so that we can stay in the blessed space and produce our hormones and be in motivation rather than procrastination. So I'm so excited to hear what you have next. And yes, too, for the menstruating woman to know that this changes and varies based on where you are in any seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall, in any 28-day cycle. So I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit at some point in this podcast interview. But okay, take it from here.
Yeah, so big surprise, right? Men have one hormone, they have testosterone, and that's on like a 24-hour and sometimes a 15-minute cycle. People talk about every 15 minutes they get a shot of testosterone. And their levels are much higher than women's levels of testosterone, and they're pretty consistent over the day, over the month, over the lifespan, right? Now, of course, as they get older, it can wane a little bit. For women, we have three. And so we have some testosterone, which helps with drive, right? But we also have estrogen. And estrogen is a hormone that is associated with social courage. And so that feeling of, I feel good about myself, I feel more beautiful, I feel this confidence to go out and meet other people. And you notice that after the pandemic, which was very stressful, all the stress coming in from the world, a lot of people said, I'm just not the same. Like, I don't go out as much. I get anxious in public. And so when we're going through perimenopause and menopause, of course, we're losing estrogen. And cortisol, as you said, will come in and start to make the small amounts of estrogen that we have even lower. And so now it's inhibiting that social courage. And of course, what comes with that is also a lot more self doubt. And that self doubt triggers cortisol as quickly as if a tiger was chasing you. The brain does not know a difference between you saying, am I good enough though? And look at how I've put on weight because the pandemic or from menopause. All of that kind of self talk, self criticism actually increases cortisol. So let's talk about progesterone. So progesterone has that calming effect. And if we don't have any progesterone, we can't sleep, we don't feel calm, we feel more anxious. And progesterone really gets chewed up by cortisol because the body really can't make progesterone when it's busy making cortisol, it has the same precursor. And I started talking about this, and women are like, oh my God, like that's me. I have trouble sleeping. I'm more anxious, especially since the pandemic. You can get stuck in a cortisol pattern that is high, and it doesn't just go away like it would for an animal when the danger is gone. And so a lot of people have found post pandemic, they're still stuck in that anxiousness. And then, of course, more stuff happens in the world. So, what's I also found in the data is that because men have this naturally higher testosterone level, they have a natural protection against cortisol. It does not affect them the same way as women. And when women have shots of this cortisol, of this stress hormone, we tend to go into our inner critic. And studies show that for women, our inner critic is more ruminative and more long term than men's inner critics are. And this part of it is the way our brain is wired to be more socially referencing. And part of it is also what estrogen does to us. There's a role estrogen plays in that social comparison and connection. But there's also a phrase called weathering that is in there that is very different for men versus women. And we can talk about that, the effects of our collective social experiences on us when we get up to speak that is different for men. And so men have this buffering and that women just don't have. So if you have noticed that, the men in your life, your partner, your brother, your friend, don't get as affected by stress, you would be right. Now, of course, it affects them. Or don't go so much into their inner critic and ruminate and ruminate. As a matter of fact, they say to you, are you still worrying about that? I can't believe you're still thinking about that. I used to think that was just personality, like random, but no, it is a men versus women thing because studies show they forget the past more easily than we do. I was talking about this to my brothers, and before I could get to the second thing that the studies show, one of my brothers blurted it out, which is men tend to not only do they forget more easily, but when they think about the past, they tend to just kind of gloss over it and come out with lessons. And that's exactly what my brother said. He's like, well, I just go here. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what the studies show.
It makes me think about Alison Armstrong. I don't know if you follow any of Alison Armstrong's work. She studied the male and female brain. I've interviewed Alison Armstrong on the podcast, and she talks about men being single-minded or single focus, whereas women, we have what she refers to as diffuse awareness. All things at all times we take on, we hold on. Even think about bearing a child, holding that child, growing it within our belly, carrying it, breastfeeding it. We're just set up that way. The interesting thing is men do have estrogen. I've found it's striking to me, many men, clients of mine, when I look at their testosterone and estrogen level, those that are getting exogenous testosterone, I'm seeing their estrogen levels skyrocket because we need to do a better job at helping them detox it. But that's a total side note. I think it sounds like it's what we do with these hormones and just the sheer amount. So men have more testosterone. It's surging every 15 to 24 hours. Whereas for women, it's generally going to surge when we're ovulating or right before we bleed. And then we go into perimenopause and menopause and estrogen is dropping. So it sounds like you're saying the inner critic comes up even stronger. Our stress response and anxiety get bigger. And in our fertility years, when we're in that first part of our cycle where estrogen is building, and we're more likely to be out in the world and social. And I think of it as like the headlights are pointing forward. As estrogen goes down, the headlights, it's more like we're up on stage under the spotlight and that inner critic comes in. And so some women will experience that as coming more inside, feeling a little bit more nervous to go out in the world, out in groups, maybe less inclined to brainstorm all the possibilities out in the world. This is fascinating. How does it relate to the motivation and procrastination conversation?
Yeah. So, well, just to finish that thought about you have your period, right? That second half, your body is now trying to build progesterone. And it doesn't because you're too stressed or you're fasting or exercising too hard or limiting carbs or putting all this pressure on yourself. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I should just do this. I should go out. I should be able to go to these things. If your body is under too much stress, you won't build the progesterone that you need, which means you'll have a rougher time with PMS and your period. To build that on the back end, this should be like a superpower of knowing like this is when it's okay for me to realize my body's trying to build progesterone. I shouldn't be pushing myself hard in my feeling of I need to pull back and I don't want to go to that dinner party. I'm going to honor that because my body, unlike men, does go in waves. And I just find women are always going, the classic phrase is, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? And that actually increases cortisol, right? Just saying what is wrong with me is a self-criticism. So when you think about dopamine, which is the neurochemical of motivation, what dopamine gets released by, there's a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and its job is to predict reward. So what it does is it kind of tunes into the self and it says, this thing that you're thinking about doing, over here, like not making 5 sandwiches and getting little hits by emptying the dishwasher and all that stuff. This thing, that's the harder thing. It's usually the thing people are procrastinating on. This thing that you are wanting to do, is it going to bring this delicious, wonderful feeling of reward? And if so, that will send the signal to give dopamine to be like, I'm just going to jump on that. I am just going to do that. Now, when men get a hit of cortisol and stress, they tend to behaviorally react by taking the horns, right? The bull by the horns, taking care of something, which gives them behaviorally more testosterone, which is a de-stress hormone for them, but not for us. If I have this thing I'm procrastinating doing, usually what I find women, the reason they're procrastinating is there's a fear under there. Like, what if I fail? What if people don't like it? What if they take me the wrong way? What if everyone in my family is like, oh, what? You can't eat gluten now? Or, oh, you can't have cake with us? Like, we expect this pushback reaction. You're negative predicting. And so this is why so many women struggle with saying, why am I procrastinating on this important thing that I want to get done? We're often unconsciously negative predicting, which increases cortisol. And when we have higher cortisol, we tend to go into inner critic more, which increases cortisol, right? So we can get really stuck in these loops. And if we don't understand the loop, we can spend years really getting harder and harder on ourselves, which really just makes the situation worse, right? And so if I think about the fight or flight, people think of it like, oh, it's energizing, right? You're like, I got to run up a tree. But when it's chronic and it's more emotional, psychological, I want you to think of the stress response as a depressant. It depresses your enthusiasm. It depresses confidence. It depresses dopamine. Because every time you think about that thing, you're like, yeah, but how are people going to react? Or what if, what if, what if? I'm not going to get dopamine to do that. And what am I going to do? I am going to go for the things like my catch all phrase is again, making somebody a sandwich, because that's going to give me a good feeling. So, what do women need to turn off cortisol? We can take the bull by the horns and take the action and fix something, and we will get behaviorally testosterone from that activity, that taking charge, and I did it. But that's not a de-stress hormone for us. We need oxytocin to come in as the master hormone and turn off the cortisol.
What if the reason you wake up exhausted even after a full night's sleep has nothing to do with your age, your schedule, your willpower? I'm Maraya Brown, a certified nurse midwife and vitality strategist. And after 2 decades supporting high-achieving women around the world, I've discovered what's really draining your energy and why most doctors miss it entirely. If you've been battling brain fog, bloating, weight that won't budge, or that nagging sense that something just feels off, you need to watch this. I created a short, powerful video that walks you through the hidden hormone chaos behind burnout and exactly how my clients turn things around in just 90 days. So click the link in the show notes to watch. It's completely free, and it might be the most important 10 minutes you spend on yourself this year. Again, click the link in the show notes, and I'll see you there. Fascinating, because I'm just thinking through when I look at a client's Dutch Plus test, I can see her 24-hour cortisol curve, and even the cortisol response has what you're talking about. Initially, I'll see elevated, 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 excess production of cortisol. And it shows me that a woman is still early in her overproduction of stress response. But what happens over time as the adrenals simply get tired and a woman moves into what I call adrenal exhaustion is her cortisol will be flat. The curve will be flat, or her body simply isn't producing it. So when you're talking about it being excitatory in that go, like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And over time, it becoming a more depressant. It literally, I'm seeing it in the cortisol curves of women over time. The cortisol response itself even becomes depressed, and the adrenals get tired. And now the body simply isn't even producing it as much, but the woman is still having the same stress response. And so I can see how it's even a stronger kind of depressive, less motivated state. And then for dopamine, I'm hearing that dopamine is around addiction and the propulsion to act. Isn't it also like if I make a to-do list and I get something done and I cross it off, that feel good of I've crossed it off? Are you saying that for men that that's a stimulant and gives them energy, but for women, dopamine is less energy producing and more oxytocin? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, there's a fine line, right? We will all get dopamine from checking off the list. It's just that what we're looking for in motivation is to have the dopamine aligned towards a goal-oriented behavior. Like, I want to accomplish this, Margaret, and I'm doom scrolling. So I'm getting my dopamine from this. I'm getting this like a disc scroll. Yeah, and it's not connected. Our dopamine can also be stolen that way because it's not really happening. I haven't really achieved something when I candy crushed.
Whereas the male is gonna go on the hunt. The dopamine is action-oriented, get it done, whereas the women will gather. The dopamine might not motivate the getting done, but the oxytocin as that source of connection and bonding, I mean, it makes so much sense evolutionarily.
Well, the oxytocin will turn down the cortisol. So now we are more regulated. And so when a system is regulated, now you are a human with your prefrontal cortex, right? What do I want in life? I want this goal. I want to crush this thing. I want to be here. And now I have all my resources, my resourcefulness, my faculties to garner my resources and go after it, right? Like we know as women, we can do friggin' hard things, right? So that's how we want to be. But I really want you to think about when you are under stress, you are biologically modified to a less intelligent, less resourceful human. So we're going back into the brain that is threat detecting. And for women, we do have a lot more threats. This is where the term weathering comes in. We've seen threats. We've seen things happen to other women. We've experienced it through our body. And so the stress response, that cortisol, is like taking you back to a primitive human. The literature talks about the prefrontal cortex going offline, and you have trouble thinking, your memory, you have trouble learning. This is why I get so excited about tapping, because with a few minutes of tapping on acupuncture points, you can shift yourself back into a cognitive human that has a higher level of consciousness. It's like we're reaching inside of our body and turning up our cortisol when we're hard on ourselves. And instead, with tapping, we can reach inside our body by tapping with our fingertips on acupuncture points, turn down the cortisol, and it also, in effect, turns up endorphins, turns up oxytocin. That's one of the reasons I love this technique.
Okay, so we're going to get into tapping, and I really want to make sure everybody hears this. For those of you that are listening, if you imagine holding your hand up in front of you, fingers wide open, and you take your thumb, you tuck it in to the inside of your hand, and then you bring your 4 fingers around your thumb. Okay, that thumb is the amygdala. Okay, it's your reptilian brain that is tucked deep inside. It's that place of, am I safe? It's 500 million years of evolution. And what Margaret is talking about is this prefrontal cortex, which has 2.5 million years of evolution. A long time, but nothing compared to our reptilian brain. So what I refer to as Miggy's out, the thumb comes out. When Miggy's out and we're in a stress response, we literally cannot think. It will override curiosity, logic, being in exploration and learning because the body doesn't feel safe. So now we bring in this beautiful technology of tapping as a resource to help tuck Miggy back in, get that thumb back underneath so the brain goes, oh, I'm safe. Now I can move up to, hey, I can feel. And then from there, oh my gosh, I can be in curiosity and think straight. Okay, so let's talk about tapping.
So, tapping, especially when you're doing it with someone or even alone, what tapping allows us to do is to process our feelings a little bit. And it always leads people to feeling suddenly more compassion for themselves, which brings on oxytocin. Like, even if you're alone, you're like, wow, no wonder I'm procrastinating. I'm actually really worried about this or that. And people have a moment of self compassion. And so, oxytocin, yes, we get it from hugs, we get it from eye contact, deep conversations, particularly with other women, feeling heard and held. It says, the danger's gone and I feel safe and I come out of the fight or flight. And so tapping accelerates that as well. So not only does it physical switch turn off the fight or flight, which is just like, it's insane that it works that way. Like tapping on acupuncture points, literally the brain scans show the brain come out of fight or flight mode. And it brings up these feel good hormones and oxytocin because you feel heard and listened to and understood, even if it's just by understanding yourself a little bit better. And we really do need that oxytocin. The other important thing I want you to remember is when you are busy saying, no, other people don't understand. I should have known better. I'm the one who could have done it better. Yeah, but I could have had it done last week, Margaret. You don't know how bad of a procrastinator I am. When we are in that inner critic mode, being right about how hard we are on ourselves, we don't allow oxytocin. We're like, no, thanks. Someone could try to hug us and we're like, yeah, I'm good. Or say, you know what, Mariah, you should be kinder to yourself. That it wasn't that big of a deal. And you're going to be like, mm-hmm. And so the very thing that we need to de-stress when we are in inner critic, which is oxytocin, we don't allow it to come in. So when we're mad at ourselves, we don't let people hug us and give us compassion. It's insane. Whereas men don't have this same whole cycle going on.
I'm laughing because last night my husband and I had an argument and I wrote my shitty first draft into my chat GPT and kind of designing a response. And I sent him an email. It was like, this is too heated, and came downstairs to the kitchen this morning and making our adaptogen elixir. And he thanked me and was so tender and loving and sweet with how beautiful the letter was and how Yes, it was exactly it, and you know what I did? I said, "Yeah, but that was my ChatGPT." I deflected, and I'm like, "There I am." I didn't allow in the receivership of his love and accolades. I did a little bit. I warmed up a tad and gave him a hug, but it was still the deflection, and he's like, "But that was those were your words. That was your sharing." "Yeah, but my ChatGPT helped me write it." And to go, "Wow, where do we deflect the actual receivership of thank you for that compliment. Thank you for that love. Thank you for that act of service that you're offering to me. Thank you for that gift." And just to really allow ourselves to receive.
Because on the inside, we know better. Thanks for the compliment. Tap, tap, tap on the head. Like we often do that, right? Like maybe to your standards, it was good, but I know better because
Mhm.
I didn't write the whole thing. And so we don't let it in, whereas that could have been a moment of really restorative feelings, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that because I know it's helpful, right? For us to hear these examples. I remember my daughter, when she was in high school, she had a bad basketball game. When I'd go to hug her, it wasn't the hand, the foot would come up. I would get the long leg, like, literally, "You can't hug me right now because she's too mad at herself." I'm so passionate about it because, again, these tools are at our disposal. It's understanding we are so different than men. Yes, we've held on to things longer and they don't understand it, but we need more care around the way we operate because of that. And using this technique of tapping really as a quick biohack that can turn down the fight or flight and allow you to feel more present, more grounded, and actually smarter. Like that's what's crazy because, originally I'm an engineer, right? So I'm like, you can make me smarter in a minute? Yes, because
Mhm.
we come out of that amygdala brain, which is amping fear. We might feel like we're smart when we're in fight or flight, but what we're doing is using our brain to detect everything that could go wrong and catastrophize it, as opposed to having a more balanced outlook.
Especially since the pandemic. Oh my gosh, it
Yeah,
just feels like it's and you're in the Northeast. Whew. You
yeah.
East Coasters, you've got more of it than us West Coasters. Okay, tapping. What is tapping? What are the points? How do we use it?
I always say if you Google EFT tapping or tapping, emotional freedom technique is what EFT stands for, used by both things, you'll realize it's the biggest thing you've never heard of. So you can find, images of like a face with dots on it. But basically, you use two fingertips of either hand or both hands and you tap on acupuncture points lightly. I'm always on camera or on stage, so I use the ones like on my face, on my hands that you can see. It really is quite a simple technique. There's 2 points that are just below the collarbone. So if you find the U-shaped bone at the base of your neck, and you go to the 2 points of that U-shaped bone, and then you just kind of come down at an angle an inch, there's a slight indentation under your collarbone. If you take even 3 or 4 fingers and tap there, which is a common place where people touch when they're upset, they put their hands on their chest. That's a really common spot that I will tell people, just do that. Walk around the room and say, this is like a biohacky way to do it, and I have a lot of videos on this. Walk around the room while you're doing this tapping here and just say something like, I don't know, or, I'm afraid. What if? You don't even have to really say the right phrase, just anything that is like frenetically going through your mind, and you will start to slow down. Right. So if I feel a little bit ADD, I don't know where to start. I'll just start walking around my house and being like, I don't know what to do. And the next thing you know, I just find myself more centered and more grounded. And so there's lots of biohacky ways to use it. The other way, a great spot, it's the whole fleshy side of the hand. So you would take all the fingers on one hand and tap where you would karate chop somebody. You would just tap on the side of your hand there and just talk about what's upsetting you. Like, I can't believe he said that. Who does that? I can't believe he said that. And you'll start to notice a more balanced perspective. So it's not about getting rid of or changing how you feel. It's honestly about you actually hearing a little bit more about how you're feeling. And the number one reaction that can happen when you tap that way is people go, "Oh, Margaret, suddenly I feel sad." Like emotion comes up. And that's okay. It's called compassion. I'm starting to feel the grief or the sadness I'm trying not to feel by yelling at myself all the time, or I'm just starting to feel just a movement of heat and emotion or anger or sadness that kind of moves through me. And then I feel more balanced and calm. And then, of course, there's doing sessions with practitioners. I train coaches in how to do sessions in this technique. And in that frame, you can really go deep on something, right? Where you're just like, I have this fear of, or I'm stuck with this, and I need a little bit more help with that. And that's where, some of the discussion about weathering comes in. So I also want to appeal to the women listening and any men listening to understand women in your life is that we forget that we do this invisible backpack full of books when we stand up to speak in any situation, because we're carrying the collective experiences of not only the fears in the world and things going on and stresses that are additive, but we are also carrying any time in our life that we have stood up and been the center of attention or been looked at and be judged for our appearance or sexualized. Sometimes that's happened to women, right as they started to develop. We carry the collective experience of seeing that happen to other women when they stood up. I remember in corporate America, right? Women bosses, and then they go away and people are all commenting on their appearance, right? Or commenting about how feminine or not feminine they look. We also carry those collective experiences of what happens when a woman stands up to speak and acts really confident or even demands fairness. And what is the reaction to that? And then you add in experiences from the community that you're part of. And so, what about a woman of color standing up and being really confident? And what have we seen if we're from that community or the queer community or different religions? So, you want to remember there's a collection of experiences that women have had that men often don't relate to that affect us from our whole life of experiences from watching it happen to other women, and that gets right in. Like, amygdala is not saying it's dangerous for you to stand out for a reason. And then what about standing out as confident, which is what women need to do if they're saying, I want to be a coach, I want to be a consultant, I want venture capital, right? I know what I'm doing. And then we add in the community that you come from. And all of that is like another brick or another book in your backpack that weighs us down when we go to speak. So if you're finding you're procrastinating about something that's important, please have self-compassion about some of these factors that you're not thinking of, but your brain remembers, right? Especially your reptilian brain. And using a technique like tapping that can help turn some of that down. It's like you have all these guys, right? The Dave Aspreys and the Tony Robbins, and they're all talking about biohack and this and that. And it's like, this is the biohack that women need. This is a biohack for us.
Say weathering, it's literally this diffuse awareness that we have going on. I talk about emotional labor that's playing in the background
Yeah.
that compounds over time, where the stress response is building, cortisol is building, the dopamine markers are there, but what women really need is the oxytocin and hormonal vitality. And over time, it ends up weathering and showing up as self-doubt or procrastination and new forms of stress, brain fog, lack of clarity, exhaustion, sleep disparities. And so what you're suggesting is that we step in and just simply do tapping. It can be gentle, you can't do it wrong, tap on any point, you can get unblocked. I say listen to it so that you're like really in receivership and not reading it with your own eyes. I'm curious if you feel the same way, Margaret. But for women that are listening to this and they're like, wow, can Margaret speak at my conference? Or how do I reach out to one of her EFT practitioners? Or what are these books? Or do you have courses? Or where else can I learn more? It sounds like your YouTube channel. We'll make sure that the links are all in the show notes. What action steps would you give to women for what to do next and how do they learn more and kind of get into your environment and your infrastructure and community more?
Sure, and we can have the link for you here to sign up for the newsletter because I'm always sending out links to my new YouTube videos, and those are very much there for you to tap along. My YouTube channel is Margaret Lynch, or I think it's Margaret M. Lynch, but you'll find me on YouTube. If you put in Margaret Lynch and tapping, you'll find some videos from me from 20 years ago, tapping in my old bedroom, which is hysterical. To me, that's the resource, right? Look at some of the titles where the videos are addressing certain things and jump in and try it. Amazon, you can get Unblocked, or my other book, Tapping into Wealth, which is tapping specifically for blocks to money and all the
Mm.
family stuff we have, the weathering that we have around our families and limiting beliefs around money. Those are some really, really great resources.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is just a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure the note takers, you probably have pages of notes. I'm a note taker too. It's fun to learn. Anything that feels unsaid, any last pieces that feel like, oh, wait, I really want to make sure that the listeners hear this.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes back to everywhere that I speak, whether it's personal growth or, it's inside of a bank or a company where I see just amazing, smart, educated, professional women at all levels of their career from 20 somethings into leadership. And when I start talking about the inner critic and the amount of preparation and readiness and perfectness before we take action, before we speak up, it just takes such a toll on our joy, our lives, our money. And the antidote to that is more self compassion. It's understanding that I have to do it 100 times better and before I can stand up and be counted. That is something that we need to undo, to be self compassionate about and not take for granted, right? Well, if I have anxiety, it must mean I need to prepare more because men are less likely to be interrupted. Men are more likely to have these conversations about promotions and raises than women, which means women are more likely to be interrupted in the workplace or publicly questioned around their value.
Mm.
And so knowing that these things are weighing on us, it's not just you, and to give yourself that love and that care and compassion. And that is actually the antidote to a lot of the spinning and the fears that we have.
Yeah, so good. And tapping. And then I love you were bringing in the piece around really supporting our hormonal vitality along the journey.
Absolutely.
So, thank you for all the work that you do. To everyone listening, I appreciate your time. I don't take it lightly. Our time is our most resource
Mhm.
commodity. And the fact that we've just shared in this exchange of time, I honor you. I cheer you on along your journey of vitality and leadership and confidence and motivation, and of course, hormonal vitality. With that, until next time, thank you for listening to the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast.